talking. Okay. So the first thing, can anybody define this word for me? So, definition of evolution, okay, is a change in allele frequency. And what is an allele? You learned that in reproduction too. So, Aiden has a different allele than Maddie does, than Trey does, for the gene hair color. What is an allele?
Like the difference of the DNA?
It's the version of the gene, because they all have a gene that controls for hair color, right? But Aiden has the red one. Trey's got, yeah, she's got lighter blonde. Brown,
Yeah.
yeah. And is yours black?
Brown or black?
Brown to black. Okay, so all of you guys have like a little bit different variation of the same gene. Okay, so change in allele, which is gene variety, allele frequency in a population over time. Okay, so say we were to count up all of the different types of hair colors and we looked at the frequencies in here, right? Or eye color, for freckles, okay? Some pretty basic ones. And we have our allele frequency. And then we redid that on Wednesday, but with Shay and Corbin in here. Would we have different allele frequencies than we did today?
Yeah.
So, lots of different things can control allele frequency, okay? There are 5 things that do this, okay? So 5 factors that cause evolution. What is the most important factor that causes evolution? I think it was the first thing on most of your guys' notes.
Natural selection.
Natural selection, the whole thing we're talking about. Okay? So, you have natural selection. Most important. Okay? So what is natural selection? And you can throw out a couple of different things. I can.
Where the environment changes your genetics or like selects your traits.
Yeah. So natural selection, this is where the environment decides, and it doesn't really select you, I kind of select your trait. It selects from all of the available ones, right? So it doesn't cause there to be a new trait, but it picks from the best available, okay? Where the environment decides what genes will make it to the next generation through environmental pressure. Okay, so let's say that there is like no competition, okay? Everybody can get food, there's plenty of land to go around, everything's good, right? But then all of a sudden, let's say you had to be able to reach up and grab food from 8 feet high, okay? So, right about there. If you can't get up here, you're not going to eat. What happens if you can't eat? You die. And if you die, does your genetics make it to the next generation? No, because, you know, you're dead. Alright? Same thing can happen though. Let's just say there was a bunch of mice, okay? And some of these mice have long hair, some of these mice have short hair, okay? Let's say we have like 5 years in a row where the summers are brutally hot, okay? Which one of those mice will live better?
Short-haired ones.
Short-haired ones. The hot one, or the long-haired ones, will get hot, and they'll burn more calories trying to cool their body down. Okay, they'll overheat. They'll have to spend more time, like sleeping and hiding underground, than they would out hunting. So, which one of those mice will be the ones that pass their genetics on? Short. And so over time, say over like 8 generations of those mice, do you think that they'll naturally have shorter hair? That's how natural selection works. It just picks for the best available trait due to environmental pressures. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about that? All right. Anybody got any ideas on the second most important one? You guys should have read about it. Yeah, Wiley?
Artificial selection?
So artificial selection, we'll talk about this, is not one of the 5 factors, because who does the picking in artificial selection?
People.
Humans do, okay? So it's unnatural. It's not something that wouldn't have happened before. Still can cause things to change, but it's not one of the 5 natural parts. So if it wasn't artificial selection, what is it? The only other one. Something, I think it was either referred to as selective breeding, or the more common one is sexual selection. Okay?
Yeah.
So, do you guys remember when we watched like those birds of paradise?
Yeah.
Oh,
They did the weird dances.
yeah.
What birds were the ones that got to mate and pass their genetics on?
The one with the cleanest house and better stuff.
Like the cleaner area and the
better
cooler
dance.
dance, right? That's going to be the stuff that attracts mates. If there was a male bird and he was pretty plain looking, do you think that, or did a really crappy dance, are the females going to pick him? No. Okay? So we can think of one sex picks mates. Okay? And the important thing here is that they're picking mates not based off of anything that keeps them alive better, because does the bird dance help keep them alive?
I mean, it could, but like.
It actually does worse. The flashier you are, you might attract a mate, right? But you also are going to stick out to predators. Okay? So, one sex picks mates based on traits that attract during mating season, but not, or but does not, excuse me, help them survive. Okay, and so we thought of what? We've got our Birds of Paradise dance, okay? What else? Can you guys think of any other ones?
Peacock.
Peacocks, right? Peacock plumage. Or peacock feathers. Okay. How about some ones that are more around here?
Pheasant.
Sure, pheasants, same thing. And now, I'm going to say this, and you guys might not think that, like, oh, they probably help. Does, besides during the rut, does having way bigger antlers really help you too much as like an elk or a deer?
Really.
I mean, you might think like, oh, it helps them fight off predators. Kind of. But the difference in having like a really massive rack versus, you know, smallish but still there, only helps when they're trying to fight for mates, right? Okay? So you can talk about elk, deer, moose, antlers. It's actually sometimes harder for them to get food because if they're moving through thicker forest, you know, it's harder for them to move through there. And the other one that I'm going to mention, because it doesn't really help them otherwise, but there's lots of birds. Again, birds are very sexually selective. Bird songs. Did you know that those get passed down? So, and the last thing I'm going to say about sexual selection is it leads to non-random mating. Okay? So that when they mate, it's not random. There's something that makes them want to pick that mate over another one. Okay? So. All right. So we got 3 more. All right. Now I'm going to put number 3 right up here. Now number 3 is it's kind of competition, but none of this occurs without competition, okay? And so what this is going to be called is genetic drift. Okay? And what genetic drift basically means is that there is a limit to how big a population can be. So, what would be something that would cause there to be genetic drift? What is the limit? The main thing that would cause there to be a limit on how many people could be in this class? Anybody got a guess?
Being sick.
No, I mean there's a complete cap. I bet you there could be 24 people in this class besides me. Space is a huge one for this, right? It would be really hard for me. There's 21 desks, okay? Then there's where Miss G sits, and there's 2 other ones. We could get more desks, but right now we'd be capped out at 24 people, okay? What are going to be some things that limit how big a population can be? You were right. In like a lot of places, when populations get too big, especially like deer and elk, they can get really sick, right? You guys ever heard of blue tongue? Do you know what blue tongue is?
I think so. When their tongue gets really swollen and then like doesn't their fur turn black? Or am I thinking something else?
Or their, sorry, what was that last part?
When their fur turns black?
The fur does kind of turn back, but it is mainly their tongue. Yeah, it turns like this bluish color and swells up, and they can't like drink water, and they can't eat, and so they like waste away. Okay, and it's a disease that you can get. All right, not us, like elk and deer. Deer get it really bad if their population gets too big. And that's one of the reasons that they set different limits on hunting each year, is sometimes a population is really, really big and they need to take out more, so they set the limit higher. Sometimes the population's small, it's a smaller limit, okay? But there are population biologists who work for like Fish, Wildlife, and Parks who determine that every year, all right? And so there's that, just other random diseases. That's a huge problem. So, sickness. We'll also talk about the more animals there are, the less territory. And what other 2 things lead to genetic drift? So we got sickness, territory. If there's less territory, there's going to be less available food. Okay? And I'll throw food and water together. But if you have sickness and you have territory disputes and you have food and water, all of this is different types of competition. Okay? Competition causes there to be, you want to pick the best and biggest and strongest mate, or you want to have the one that's going to survive best. Okay? So this provides competition. Alright, we got 2 more. Am I good to erase this side over here? Trey?
Yeah.
Are you done with this side? Okay. Okay. And so, the last 2 that we're going to talk about here, and then we'll take a little break. Gene flow. Okay?
Is that number 4?
Yep. Sorry. And gene flow basically just means the movement of new organisms into a population. Okay? So like, if we got a new kid in class, that would be part of gene flow, okay? or when deer or elk from one herd move into another herd, okay? Any sort of thing like that can happen. With gene flow though, so let's think about like a lion, or yeah. How many males are usually in a pride in a lion?
One.
Like one. Sometimes he's got some younger, like, sons, basically, but there aren't very many male lions in a pride besides the main head of the pride, okay? But what could move into there? What?
Females.
Other females, right? Okay? So you can get new females that move in. You can also have non-territorial species. Things like salmon, right? Now what do you think selects for salmon? What do salmon have to do every year? Where do salmon live most of their lives at?
Swim.
They live like and not the ones we have around here, but I'm talking about like kokanee salmon, like big salmon, live in the ocean. But where are they born?
In a river.
Freshwater rivers, okay? They have to do this thing where they swim upriver and they have to make it to their spawning spot. If they don't make it to the spawning spot, what happens? They die. They don't reproduce, their genetics don't make it to the next round. So the natural selection thing for them, and basically the sexual selection thing, because they don't reproduce if they don't make it, is you have to be able to make it all the way upriver back to your spawning spot. Okay? Once you make it there, salmon die. Salmon don't come back to the river, or come back to the ocean. Okay? But gene flow, you could get other salmon moving in. Okay? There's plenty of salmon that are in the ocean that move up there every year. Okay? So lots of like females. And sometimes it's males who pick, but very, very rarely are the males are the ones who get to pick, okay? Females make males fight, whether it's elk or lions or any of those things, okay? But so, gene flow, usually females, but new organisms bring what? They're going to bring something really important into the mix. New, because what is evolution to begin with? It's the change in allele frequency in population over time. So for there to actually be a change, they have to bring new what?
DNA.
Yeah, new DNA, new alleles. New alleles. DNA, genes. Okay? But now, this will take us to question number 5, or focus number 5. How does Aiden have red hair versus you have blonde hair versus you have black hair versus you have brown hair? How did we even get those to begin with?
Parent.
Well, where'd they get it from?
Their parents.
Where did they get it from?
Their parents. Just
Eventually, if you go back far enough, according to science, obviously, we all come from like a same basic set of DNA that first started in primordial soup, right? How did we get a variation of that? How do you get new genes? How do you get new versions of genes? Random mutations, okay? Sometimes stuff just happens, okay? But we need random mutations, okay? These create new genes and versions of genes that can be passed down. Now, what is a mutation? How do you get mutations? Maddie?
It's a change in the genetic structure.
Yeah, so when you copy DNA, right? During mitosis, we make another copy of our DNA. You guys remember talking about that? When you copy DNA, sometimes it messes up. And makes a new copy. Or I should say a copy with new code. DNA code. Okay? And I think we talked about this, but I'll mention it again. Out of every 100 mutations, how many of them do nothing?
Wasn't it like 95%?
93, yeah. 93 out of 100 mutations have no effect. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't do absolutely nothing, but again, sorry, I'm not picking on you by any means. I'm just using the different hair colors as a. Does Aiden having red hair versus Wiley having black hair versus Maddie having blonde hair do anything to really give you an edge? No. Just your hair is a different color, right? So, does nothing. Okay? It's one of the mutations that happened. Now, your parents just have different DNA for different hair colors. You get passed down. Doesn't really matter what color hair you get. It's just whatever your parents had. But eventually along the way, we had mutations. Could eventually have mutations. Maybe, you know, Trey's great-great-great-grandkids are going to have naturally purple hair.
What?
You never know.
Okay, if I'm still alive then, I just call them mutants.
I mean, technically they would be. We're all mutants in our own way, because we all have mutations. Okay?
My mom's actually a blonde. Or was until she dyed her hair. So I got
Technically she
my
still is a blonde, just with different colored hair due to
So,
outsider.
then we got this here. We got 7 left, right? What is it?
4.
Yep.
6.
4 out of 100 mutations. Cause problems. Okay? But do not, and I'm going to say at least immediately, kill you. Okay? And so if you get one of those, let's just say something like asthma, right?
My sister has asthma.
I mean, asthma, not everybody has asthma, right? And is asthma genetic? Partially. For the most part. I mean, little kids don't come out of the womb like with bad lungs generally, unless it's a genetic thing. But can you live with asthma?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it doesn't help you. It's definitely a detriment. Okay? And so, that's going to be like one of these. Then there are other things. 2 out of 100. Mutations are lethal to embryo. Okay, so whether it dies before it ever makes it out or it dies at childbirth, there are complications, mutations that lead to problems that you can't live with. Okay? And then finally, so we got 93 plus 4 plus 2. How many are we left with?
1.
1. About 1 in every 100 mutations. Are helpful. Okay? Things that would make it better for you. Okay? Now, are there any questions about... Alright. Again, the last thing we'll talk about today is artificial selection. Okay. And this is selection of traits or phenotypes preferable to humans. Okay? So, right here. What does that mean? GMO. Sure you guys all heard of GMOs before. They're apparently really bad things. Stands for genetically modified organism. So what does this sound like to you? Because I know when I think of, or at least when I used to think of GMOs, I would think of, do you guys know like what they do with, not all chickens, but like you guys will see things that say like free range chicken on it, right? What does that mean?
That they get to just like run around.
Yeah, they get to walk around. Usually they're in like some sort of farm where it's pretty open setting, okay? But like chicken breast and chicken thighs are usually the things that sell the most, right? So there's some genetically modified chickens that pretty much they live in a cage and they've had their DNA altered so that they grow really big breast muscle and really big thigh muscle, and they can't move. They're too big to move. They get fed in their little cage, and that's all that really happens, and eventually they get killed and slaughtered. Okay? That's what I always thought of when I thought GMOs, right? But how many of you guys have a dog?
What?
I used to have 7.
Okay, so you've had dogs?
Yeah.
I have to.
Dogs, do dogs really occur in nature very much? Where do they occur? What are they in nature? What they used to be anyway.
Wolves.
Wolves. And then what did we do?
Domesticate them.
We domesticated them. Okay, so GMO, everything is a GMO. Do you guys know what corn used to look like?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It looks nasty.
Yeah.
Dude, corn used to
It was in one of those videos.
It was like a grain
Yeah.
that small.
Ancient corn versus so right here. That's what, well, old corn used to look like this. Had like a couple of kernels on it. Obviously this is what new corn looks like. Why does it look like that compared to that? You think we got very much off of that? But it probably took about the same to grow both those plants, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why did this or this turn into this?
Because people changed it, like the DNA things of it.
So they used to do that, or we now currently can do that. But how did we? Because I mean, hundreds of years ago we still had corn looking like that, our new modern corn. How did they change it? So maybe if you're a farmer and you've got some stuff that kind of looks like this, and then you've got bigger versions of that stuff, right? Or ones that are growing more kernels. Which one are you going to try and make sure grows?
The one with kernels.
You're going to probably kill off some of the crappy plants, right? So that way there's a better chance that your bigger, stronger plants grow. Okay? So, genetically modified organisms, these can be lab created, which is kind of a gross thing, like to have like those chickens that just kind of grow there. But genetically modified organisms are also anything humans created through selective breeding. Okay, and selective breeding, all that is humans picking optimal traits. Okay, so whether that is bigger, hardier corn, right? What else? We could also talk about dogs. All dogs originally were domesticated wolves. Okay? What did we do there? We probably found the wolves that were, well, probably what we originally did was we essentially caught some like wolf puppies, right? Then we raised those wolf puppies. Then out of all those puppies, we probably took the ones that were the most friendly, right? Or the most obedient. Okay? Picked traits to get friendly and obedient. Okay? Then after we've domesticated these wolves, we've made them more friendly. We've essentially changed them into basic dogs. Now, all of a sudden, instead of just wolf dogs, so let's just say, you know, Broden wants a Chihuahua. You want a Great Dane back there, Maddie.
I want a pit bull.
Sure, he wants a pit bull. Yeah. Alright? How do we start getting all these different dogs that do different things? Selective breeding, artificial selection, humans picking, right? Same thing with cows. The cows come from an old ancestor called an aurochs. Let me see if I can pull one up. There we are. So, if we look at these, This is more closer to what the first modern cows were starting to look like. And this were aurochs. They were a lot bigger, okay? Here's probably about the size of an aurochs. 1.85 meters is 6 feet. Okay? So these things were
Massive.
very large. Probably very hard to control. Right? Probably didn't stay in pens very well. Or weren't herded very well.
Or just go all over the fence.
So, what do you think they selected originally for aurochs?
Smaller ones.
Probably a little bit smaller, more manageable, okay? Then they also probably picked ones that were less aggressive. All those sorts of things, okay? And now we have a plethora of different cattle, okay? So, is everybody kind of picking up the difference between, and why artificial selection is not part of evolution? We do that. Artificial versus natural or sexual selection. Natural selection and sexual selection are both natural processes that would occur whether humans were here or not. Okay? Okay. So, let's